What if I told you that saving the Roman Empire would actually doom humanity to 1,000 years of technological stagnation and prevent the Renaissance from ever happening? You're about to discover why the greatest act of historical heroism might be the worst mistake in human history. You've just materialized in the marble halls of the Palatine Hill in 470 AD. Emperor Julius Nepos sits on his throne, unaware that barbarian armies are massing beyond the Alps, and that his empire has less than 6 years left. You have complete knowledge of Rome's fall, every military defeat, every political betrayal, every economic collapse that's coming. You could warn him about Odoacer's invasion, the corruption bleeding the treasury dry, or the Gothic tribes preparing to sack the Eternal City one final time. The question isn't whether you could save Rome, it's whether you should, because what happens next will shatter everything you thought you knew about progress and civilization. Here's where it gets interesting. Let's say you succeed beyond your wildest dreams. You convince Nepos to implement sweeping military reforms, root out corruption, and negotiate brilliant alliances with the barbarian tribes. Rome doesn't fall in 476 AD. Instead, it adapts, survives, and continues for another 1,000 years. Sounds heroic, right? But here's what you didn't consider. Every single advancement that built our modern world depended on Rome's collapse. The immediate consequences seem overwhelmingly positive. By 500 AD, your intervention has created a reformed Roman Empire that successfully integrated Gothic and Vandal tribes as federates rather than enemies. The military is revitalized, the economy stabilized, and the borders secure. Constantinople and Rome work in harmony instead of bitter rivalry. Christianity continues to spread, but now it's unified under Roman imperial authority rather than fragmenting into competing kingdoms. The aqueducts keep flowing, the roads remain maintained, and Roman law continues to evolve and expand across Europe, Africa, and Asia. But here's where things get truly terrifying. This successful Rome becomes the ultimate conservative force in human history. Think about what drove innovation in our timeline. Competition between kingdoms, the chaos of the Dark Ages that forced technological adaptation, the need for smaller states to find advantages over larger ones. Your Rome eliminates all of that. Why would anyone develop new military technologies when Roman legions remain supreme? Why innovate in agriculture when Roman estates efficiently feed the empire? Why create new forms of government when Roman administration works perfectly? The ripple effects cascade through the centuries in ways that would make your head spin. The Islamic Golden Age, which gave us algebra, advanced astronomy, and preserved Greek philosophy during Europe's Dark Ages, never happens because a unified Roman Empire maintains direct control over the Middle East and North Africa. There's no power vacuum for Islamic civilization to fill. The Vikings never raid and explore because Roman naval power controls the Mediterranean and Atlantic trade routes. No Viking raids means no Norman conquest of England, no establishment of powerful medieval kingdoms that would later challenge Rome's dominance. But the most disturbing possibility is what happens to human knowledge itself. In our timeline, the fall of Rome scattered Roman texts and knowledge across dozens of kingdoms and monasteries. This fragmentation actually preserved learning because no single catastrophe could destroy everything. When Rome survived in the East as Byzantium, and when Islamic scholars translated Greek works, and when medieval monasteries copied ancient texts, knowledge survived through redundancy and competition between cultures. Your eternal Rome creates the opposite. A single point of failure for all human knowledge. When your Roman Empire finally faces its inevitable crisis, maybe a plague in the 12th century or a massive climate event in the 14th, there's no backup. No competing civilizations have developed the same knowledge base. No rival kingdoms have independently preserved classical learning. When this super Rome eventually falls, it takes everything with it in a collapse that makes the historical Dark Ages look like a minor inconvenience. The scientific revolution that began in the 16th century? It never happens. That revolution required the specific conditions of competing European kingdoms, each trying to gain advantages through new technologies and discoveries. Your Roman Empire eliminates that competition. Roman scholars might make gradual improvements to existing knowledge, but they have no incentive for the revolutionary thinking that gave us Copernicus, Galileo, and Newton. The printing press, which spread ideas rapidly across fragmented Europe, has no purpose in an empire where Roman scribes already efficiently copy and distribute approved texts. Here's what's truly mind-bending. The very chaos and fragmentation you prevented by saving Rome is what created the conditions for every major advance in human civilization. The feudal system that emerged from Rome's collapse created competitive pressures that drove military innovation. The competing Christian kingdoms funded exploration to find new trade routes and resources. The Renaissance happened because competing Italian city-states needed to distinguish themselves through art, architecture, and learning. Even democracy as we know it might never develop. The Roman Republic had collapsed long before your intervention, and your successful empire becomes an increasingly efficient autocracy. The English Parliament, which emerged from medieval nobles demanding rights from their kings, never forms because there are no independent medieval kings. The American Revolution, inspired by Enlightenment thinking about natural rights and self-governance, never happens because the Enlightenment itself requires the intellectual ferment of competing European powers that your Rome prevented. The moral complexity here is staggering. You've saved millions of lives by preventing the collapse of Roman civilization. You've eliminated centuries of warfare, famine, and suffering that characterized the medieval period. You've preserved an advanced legal system, engineering knowledge, and administrative efficiency that took Europe centuries to redevelop. But you've also trapped humanity in a gilded cage of permanent stagnation. Consider this: our timeline produced antibiotics, computers, human rights declarations, and space exploration despite the chaos of Rome's fall, or perhaps because of it. Your timeline produces a stable, efficient empire that lasts for centuries but never develops the scientific method, never questions fundamental assumptions about government, never pushes the boundaries of human knowledge in truly revolutionary ways. The butterfly effect reveals its ultimate irony. The barbarian Odoacer, who historically deposed the last Roman emperor, might seem like a destroyer of civilization. But his victory created the power vacuum that allowed new forms of government, new technologies, and new ways of thinking to emerge. The Gothic kingdoms that replaced Rome in Western Europe became the foundation for medieval innovation. The preservation of Roman knowledge in the Eastern Empire created the Byzantine scholars who would later influence the Renaissance. Your act of salvation becomes an act of imprisonment. You've created a world where humanity survives but never truly thrives, where civilization continues but never evolves, where the species remains trapped in a comfortable but ultimately limiting Roman cage for millennium after millennium. This brings us to the ultimate question: is progress worth suffering? Would you still warn Rome if you knew that saving the empire meant humanity would never reach the stars, never cure cancer, never develop the concept of universal human rights? Is the preservation of one great civilization worth the sacrifice of all the civilizations that could have been? The answer reveals something profound about the nature of historical choice. Every decision we make, every life we save, every catastrophe we prevent, closes off infinite other possibilities. The road not taken doesn't just lead to a different destination. It leads to an entirely different universe of human potential. What do you think? If you could go back and warn Rome about its fall, knowing what you know now about the consequences, would you still do it? And if you're intrigued by the mind-bending possibilities of changing history, wait until you hear what would happen if you prevented the Black Death. The implications will make this Roman scenario look simple by comparison.